The key skill, if I give one skill to people though, is sales. Being willing to have conversations because you have to sell a ticket to the event. You have to sell at the event. So many people think like if I build it, they will come. And that's definitely not how it works at all, ever. You have to be willing to have conversations, and sales is when the value you provide outweighs the price that they pay.
Step into the world of success with Your Brand Amplified, the ultimate podcast designed to unravel the intricacies of thriving businesses. I'm your host, Annika Jackson, and I'm on a mission to uncover the stories, strategies, and secrets that have propelled entrepreneurs and business leaders to success.
Steve Werner, I am thrilled to have you on talking about something that a lot of people have trouble with. And we can be great public speakers. We can be teachers in the classroom. We can have podcasts. We can do all kinds of things that get us in front of people. But there's something different about workshops and stages and selling that I think, it's sometimes can be daunting to make that transition. And you, of course, reach millions with your company reaching millions. And this is exactly your sweet spot. So I'm really excited to dive into this topic today.
Awesome. I think we'll have a lot of fun.
Yeah. And before we get into that, of course, your whole background is in service, entertainment, helping people feel really good about the environment they're in as a sommelier, general manager, restaurant worker, all the things you were doing in hospitality before you decided to take the leap. So what got you into hospitality, and what was that pinnacle moment that made you want to do something different and something for yourself?
Man, I started working in restaurants when I was 12.
Oh.
long time ago in a land far, far away, right? But then in high school, I actually was one of the top salespeople for Cutco knives. I don't know if you know what Cutco is, but they used to have these signs up, and minimum wage at the time, I think it was $4.25. That'll date me a little bit, but it was a long time ago. This is in the 90s. So they had a sign up that was make $12 an hour. And I was like, so of course I called on it. And what I ended up doing was selling Cutco knives at the restaurant where I waited tables. I would give them to people to use. I worked at a really cheesy steakhouse called Ponderosa, like a Golden Corral, but we had these, they were almost plastic steak knives. They were like the chintziest, cheapest thing in the world. So I started giving people these Cutco knives, and then it led to appointments. I ended up selling, but I really liked waiting tables. Then in college, I bartended, I waited tables, but I started a business in college. So I quit that. And then I ended up, the business, I sold it, but I have to like put a big asterisk. Yes, I did make some money, but it wasn't like I suddenly like had millions in the bank. I made a little bit of money, but it was a really, really painful experience. So I took the money and I traveled, because what else do you do when you have a little bit of money, right?
Yeah.
I was lucky. I had done a semester abroad in Italy in college, and that's what caused me to start the business then. I was like, I want to start a business and I want to travel. I started a couple businesses, and before you knew it, I was still in school, and I was working 1 million hours a week, not sleeping, but I had the energy, right? And I was like, I'm doing this. And then I woke up and I was like, this is miserable. And then I ended up selling the business. I had some things happen. And so I went and traveled, and I always told myself, I'll start another business. I don't know if you write stuff down, but like I use composition books. I had 3 of them packed full of business ideas, but the pain was too much to start another business. I kept having these horrible thoughts of like the pain that I had experienced going through with the last business. So I never started. I ended up one day on my friend's couch in Chicago and back in restaurants. And this time though, instead of Ponderosa, I started working in a fine dining steakhouse. I don't know. You ever been to like a Morton's or anything?
Yes. And I actually was a club promoter in Chicago in the mid to late 90s.
Oh man, we might have crossed paths. I was there. I got there in 99. Well, I didn't move there till later. I moved there in 2005, but Rosebud was the place that I worked at. And then I worked at a couple other fine dining places. And the thing is, like Ponderosa, a really good double shift, I would make $100. A good double shift in Chicago, I'm walking home with like 800 or 900. And so I was supposed to work one night a week. That was the deal. This is a great story. Do you remember the corn cobs right downtown, like the corn cob buildings? There were two apartments that looked like giant round spheres, and there's a Smith & Lewinsky in the bottom of them. It's right on Michigan Avenue. You went in there to grab a drink when I was visiting my friend, and the manager was behind the bar bartending, and he was complaining nonstop about the guy who didn't show up. And I said, well, if you just need somebody 1 or 2 nights a week, I'll show up. And he was like, do you have a tuxedo? And I was like, no. And he's like, go buy a tuxedo. Show up Monday. So I show up on Monday. He didn't remember making the offer. Later, I mean, if you've been a club promoter, like later I found out he was just an alcoholic. He was always smashed, which is pretty normal. So anyway, he didn't remember, but he's like, you're here, you bought a tuxedo. He's like, cool. He threw me behind the bar. Well, then, 2 nights a week turned into 4 nights a week, turned into 5 nights a week, turned into me not buying. I rented a place right on Lakeshore in Erie, like overlooking the lake, had a baller apartment. And I was making over $100K a year in the early 2000s waiting tables. And I was like, this is fun. And then fast forward 3 years, I ended up going through Denver on a flight. And I was like, I used to love snowboarding. I used to love coming out west in college. And I randomly applied on Vail's website. Vail reached out, interviewed me. They said, you're not the right fit. Like, this is a fast casual restaurant. I said, no problem. I'm back in Chicago. And then they called me up and they were like, hey, we have a fine dining job and you're perfect for it. And that led to me moving to Vail. But all of that eventually, I think this happens to a lot of people. So that was like, right there was like from the time I was 25 till the time I was 35, 36. And then you ask, like, how do you finally start a business? How do you take the leap? I went to a Tony Robbins event, and he asked the simple question of like, is your life ending up how you thought it would? And I think, I don't know, we talked a little about your history, like from early 2000s, doing magazine stuff to like where you are now. It's so crazy to me. So Tony asked, like, is your life where you thought it would be? And the answer was no. And then the second question is, are you happy with it? And he asked you to actually rate it. And this is something that you can use anytime you ask somebody to rate something. He said, rate it on a scale of 1 to 10. You cannot use 7. Right? Because that's what everybody. He's like, so if you're a 6 or below, you're not like, you're going to wake up with regrets. You're going to be, 70, 80 years old, and you're going to look back and have regrets. And he's like, if you're an 8 or a 9, maybe it's not going how you want, but it's doing okay. And you're happy with it. And that like really bothered me because I was like, I live in one of the most beautiful places in the world. I have a ski in, ski out in Vail, but I live with 5 other people in a 3-bedroom apartment because that's the only way like serving. I mean, you could afford a single bed, but man, you're going to pay everything you make. So I left there with that and I started thinking about it, and I pulled out those composition books and I started going through them and like asking myself, like, what do I really, really want to do? And of course, I didn't end up doing what I set out to do, but I read the 4-Hour Work Week, and that kind of got me thinking about stuff. I actually started selling pool cues. I don't tell this story very often.
Was that something was that what your intention was?
No.
What was your intention? And then how did you end up selling pool? That's so random.
It's so weird, right? So the intention was, how do I build? So you read the 4-Hour Work Week and it just gets your head spinning. And I was like, how do I build a lifestyle business? How do I build a business that makes some money that I can do in not 4 hours a week, but maybe 15 or 20? And through all kinds of weird stuff, I ended up you can build these websites. You used to be able to do this. This is like 2012, 2013. You can build websites that sell a singular product, and you could drive enough Google AdWord traffic to it that you would be profitable. And pool cues, I did the research, and pool cues was one of the most underserved markets. So I was like, okay, whatever. So I taught myself how to code a website. I put together a website. I was working in Telluride at the time. We talked a little bit about that. Telluride lured me away from Vail, ski town. So I'm down there, and I don't know, in my nights and weekends, season of 2012 to 13, I started putting this thing together. Well, it made some money, but it didn't make as much as I wanted. And I was like, I actually hate this. This is worse than working a job, right? I mean, I'm not a coder. I like talking to people. But that spurred the question of, well, you like talking to people. What can you do? How does that work? And it led me to public speaking. So I was like, okay, I'm going to start doing the public speaking thing. I had put in my notice to quit my job, and I was like, I'm going to hold an event because that's what speakers do, right? That's what Tony Robbins does. That's what I had seen like other people in the past do. I was like, okay. I went to Vegas and I cashed out my 401k. I rented the largest ballroom that I could find, which was at Treasure Island. And I started putting together like a website and all the crap that you think you need, which I didn't even know where to start, right? But I was like, Tony said, do it and the path will work out. Well, what do you think happened?
I think you are very audacious. That's a good, in a positive way.
That's very fair. That's very kind. The nice way is I just fell flat on my face. I went through my 401k, which was about 60 or 70 grand. I had about 30K in cash saved up. I went through all of that and I sold 2 tickets to a 2,500 person auditorium. I ended up getting threatened with a lawsuit from Treasure Island. They called me in. Well, like, have you held a big event?
I have not held one on that scale.
But that you understand events, like they have a thing called a room block. So I had a room block of 250 rooms for 3 nights.
Oh yeah. Oh, no.
Right. So right there, just do the math on that. My price at the time was, I think it was 99 or 109 a night. We'll just say it's $100 a night. So 25K times 3. And then I had food and beverage for 2,500 people for 3 days.
Yikes.
So they called me 6 weeks before the event and she was like, I'll never forget. Like, I was like, I got to take this person's call. Like, oh gosh. And she's like, so we're trying to figure out what's going on. None of your rooms have booked. Like we're kind of running into this. We need you to come in. And I was like, oh no. So I ended up going in and having a conversation that did not go all that well. But I just said, hey, at this point, like I've spent all the money that I have. I'm starting to rack up debt and I don't have anything. And she was like, well, we can sue you. And I said, you can sue me, but I don't have anything. What are you going to do? So anyway, that ended up, they let me out of my contract. They kept the $5,000 deposit, but something really good came out of it. And I'm a big believer in this. Like the hardest times in our lives are the things that like lead us to the biggest breakthroughs. You usually don't see it till you're down the road a little bit. So my friends, I had made some friends in Vegas that were entrepreneurs and they were tech entrepreneurs. They had a couple exits, but they actually went with me to Treasure Island because they were like, we're going to go down there with you because you probably need some support.
Oh,
they were really nice,
awesome.
Right?
Yeah.
So we're sitting in this place called the Frog Bar, which is a cheesy bar in Treasure Island afterwards. And they said, well, what went wrong? And like, I was really defensive at the time because I wanted to like put on this strong front. And once we got past the defensiveness, they said like, calm down a little bit. Like, what really went wrong? Why didn't this work? And we put a list on a napkin of like, I don't know how to do marketing. I don't know how to do sales. I don't know how to talk to people. I didn't know how to build, like, I didn't have a headline for the event. I came from restaurants. It was called the restaurant event. That's the name of it.
Ah, okay. I was going to ask, what was the event about? Like, what was the genesis?
I was like, what do I know? I know restaurants and I know a lot of people in restaurants. So I had like 20 speakers that were all like GMs. Head of Vail Mountain Dining was going to come speak. Because here's the thing. Do you like to speak?
Yes.
If I invited you to come speak at something, would you really do that much research? If it came with a plane ticket and a hotel room?
No, probably not.
Right. This is the secret. Like, we'll come back to this because when we get into how events work, this is why you don't want to just build an event full of speakers because everybody will come. They say they'll promote, but they don't. We'll talk about that later. So yeah, this event, like, I didn't know how to do any of the stuff, but we wrote all that down and they said, okay. And they said, so what are you going to do now? And I said, well, I had 2 headhunters had contacted me because I was actually really good at my job. And they had contacted me. One was actually coming back to a Vail-owned resort and one was going up to Montana. And they both paid 6 figures, low 6 figures. And I said, well, I think I'm going to go take one of those jobs. I said, if nothing else, I'm going to get a job bartending. And they said, there's nothing wrong with that. And 10 years from now, what are you going to want to look back and say that you did? Like, which are you going to be happier with? And I was like, oh, that's blah, blah, blah. And they were like, if you stuck with this, if you took all these things that were on the napkin and you figured them out, do you think you might be successful? And they kept like asking questions. And I really wanted to take the job. Because at this point, I had no money. I think I'd maybe racked up $5,000 in debt on credit cards, but I had no way to pay anything, right? I had no income. And I was like, man, this sucks. And they were like, if you go back, you can go back, but you're either going to wake up 10 years from now still in that industry, wondering what could have been, or you're going to go back, you're going to spend 2 or 3 years, then you're going to come back and you're going to try again. But because you haven't learned the things, the chances of success are the same. And I said, well, they said, if you could wave a magic, they didn't actually use the magic wand question, but it is the magic wand question. If you could wave a magic wand and do whatever you wanted, what would you do? And I said, well, if I could figure this out, I would really like to figure it out. And he said, so here's the deal. We'll let you stay in our guest room, which was like kind of a catch-all. It was his workshop. He's like, we'll let you stay there for 3 months, but you have to hold another event inside of 3 months.
Oh my gosh.
And they were like, we want to put your feet to the fire. We want to see, you have to push yourself. They had started their tech company. They both lived in San Francisco and they both worked for tech. Then they had started dating and they decided to open their company, and they moved home to his dad's basement because they were like, we had a little bit of savings, but paying $4,000 a month in rent in San Francisco. And they were like, so you have to do the same thing, but you have to buckle down. You have to get books on this stuff. You have to learn the stuff that you said you need to learn, and you have to hold an event. And that led to, I said, okay, I'll give it a shot. So we ended up, the very short version, because this has been a long story, but the short version, I ended up renting a room for 50 people at South Point Casino, which is off the Strip. They required a $500 deposit, which I put on a credit card. And then I went to the library and just started reading. Through that, I found this book. It's a really old book. You don't have to go get it. I wouldn't really recommend it. It's called Butts in Seats. But it basically said, take donuts, muffins, a fruit tray, or coffee into dentists, chiropractors, or med spas. That will get you 30 seconds. Invite the office manager and do a 2-for-1 ticket deal where if they buy a ticket to the event, they can bring their boss. Because I didn't know any of this, but they were like, the office manager is the one who makes the decision on the event, not the owner. The chiropractor or the dentist is going to say, ask the person. So I went around, this is funny. I went to Krispy Kreme Donuts. They had a buy one, doesn't get one free coupon. I used that coupon so many times, they banned me. But I would go in every morning and the limit was 6, and I would get 6 dozen donuts. I would split them into 2 boxes. So now I have 12 offices, and I would start at 7 a.m. and I would drive, and I literally hit the very first conference, that one that was successful, was South Point Casino. We ended up with 83 people in the room, standing room only. And I filled it through taking donuts into dentist offices.
What was the topic though? What was this event about?
You're going to laugh. It was the Dentist Marketing Expo. That's what it was called. Not very original in naming. We did come up with a good hook for it. So this was 2013, summer of 2013, fall of 2013. What we did was, so this was in the book, and this is actually a good takeaway, although I wouldn't recommend it. I'll explain why. The book said, go through industry-specific journals and look for the authors of magazine articles, and then invite them, give them a free ticket and a hotel, because they're all looking for publicity. They're all looking to get their name out there. So these were dentists that had written for dental journals, which I got at the library. So I just contacted them, and just like you said, they were like, yeah, I'd love to speak. And we paid for their flight and hotel. We didn't give them per diem or anything like that. We did give them food at the event because I had to get food and beverage. But it was dental marketing. So 2013, Facebook ads weren't a thing yet. You couldn't even do ads on Facebook. Right? Remember that? Remember when Facebook was nice to go on and people were friendly? And
I do hear that the algorithm is changing back to that, trying to show us more family and friends content. But that's another story for another day.
Yeah, right? I don't think they will. They're too interested. They're making so much money. Anyway, wait till he gets our glasses on our head that show us ads all the time.
Right.
That's so that's how we held that event. I did not sell anything at the event, which actually, this will kind of segue us into where we're going. You can cut as much of this as you want. But we held that event. I made about between $9,000 and $10,000, about $9,300. And I thought I was the king of the world. I was like, yes, I won. I'm making money. But it took me 3 months to hold that event.
Yeah.
So I went to the guy who had written the book, Butts and Seats. His name's Dan Kennedy. If you don't know Dan, I do recommend looking him up. He's the godfather of marketing, pretty much, like 70s, 80s, 90s. So I go to Dan's event. I paid an extra $200 to sit at his table, and you get 5 minutes with Dan is how they build it. And so I tell the whole story, and I'm all excited, and he just looks at me, and he's a grumpy old man. And he looked at me and he just goes, "You're an idiot." And I was like, "What?" I was so excited, and like I just got crushed. And he goes, "You're a dum-dum." Like he called everybody dum-dums, but he did hand people dum-dums sometimes. But he's like, seriously, he's like, does somebody else at the table want to say it? He's like, you had 83 people in the room and you didn't sell them anything. He's like, the reason that you hold an event is to sell people things. And I was like, but I don't have anything to sell. And he goes, you see that table over there? That's all my stuff. Pick anything you want and sell it, and I'll give you 30%.
Wow.
And I was like, I don't know how to sell. I have no idea. And he was like, well, watch me sell it, practice, and then go sell it. And I was like, okay. So that's, we held another event. Instead of dentists, we did chiropractors, and Dan had a system for chiropractors, which I sold at the event. And the next event, I made about 25K. And then we did that again, and we got better at it. But then by that point, I had paid Dan money, and I joined his program, and he helped me develop. He was like, develop your own stuff. And then Facebook ads. We ended up selling Facebook ads 2017, 18. We had an agency, which I hated running. So I sold the agency part, and we just focused on events. But between 2013 and COVID, we had done somewhere in the realm of 80 to 90 live events.
Wow.
City to city, 50 to 100 people in the room. And then you do serve them. You want to give them a lot of value. But anyone who comes to an event, if they're willing to get on a plane, get a hotel, come spend their time, you can sell them, but you want to sell them something that actually nurtures them and like gives them results over time. So that's how we ended up with events. That's a very long story, but it's fun.
Yeah. But so maybe dentists, chiropractors weren't your passion areas, but events, learning how to hold them. I can see in some ways, I mean, making the money you made at the first event, that's still, if you look back at like if you'd had to pay rent and all these other things, it's really not enough. But the fact that you could then parlay that into something bigger and better over time.
That's exactly what ended up happening. I mean, the first 2 years were a grind. And like, because there's so much that goes into doing an event. And like, yeah, to your point, $9,000 divided by 3 months is $3,000 a month. Like that's livable with barely. And then you fast forward that to like, okay, you're traveling. Now you're doing ads. Now we're doing all this stuff to hold the event. And like $25,000, you're starting to make some money, but it's still not like good money, because I would say your profit margin on that's probably 30%, 40%. When you really start selling from stage though, you can do nowadays, we did an event 3 weeks ago. We had 63 buying units in the room, about 90 people. Some of them were couples. And we ended up doing like just shy of $700,000. So a much better result, right? That event, our budget for the event, just to put this into perspective for people, was about $150,000. And then on top of that, this is not my event. I helped build this event for somebody. She has her team to pay, right? We had salespeople that were in the room that were doing sales. They get their commission. And then she now has a year-long program that she has to support people in, which is having coaches. So her profit margin, if we take the $150,000 budget out of it, let's say she made $650,000. So she's at $500,000. I would say it's a probably 50 to 60% profit margin when it's all said and done, which is good. And she's doing 3 of those a year. That is definitely possible. She did not start there either, though. I have another client. This might be more in line with what you're thinking, or like where we'll give it like opposites. I have another client, has never held an event, has an email list with less than 300 people on it, but is good at networking. She lives in Miami. And she was like, I really want to hold an event. And she had heard my story and she said, can you walk me through it? She's actually holding her event this week, 10 people. She sold 10 tickets. That was our goal. I said, if you can put 10 people in a small room The smaller the event is, your closing rate goes up. She has not held the event. My guess is that she'll close half of them and she'll end up somewhere between, she's selling a little bit lower ticket offer. She'll end up, my guess is between 50 and 75K in revenue with a budget of 5K. So very good, right? There's a lady named Eileen Wilder. I helped with her first event, 11 people. She cleared 94,000. So it's possible.
Yeah.
But it's like the key skill, if I could give one skill to people though, is sales. Being willing to have conversations where because you have to sell a ticket to the event. You have to sell at the event. So many people think like if I build it, they will come. And that's definitely not how it works at all, ever. You have to be willing to have conversations, and sales is when the value you provide outweighs the price that they pay. That's when people open up their wallet, swipe their credit card, do the thing. And how do you build that? I didn't know how to do that at all in the first, year. I was just giving people donuts.
What was the business that you thought you were going to launch initially?
So it went from pool cues to, I thought I was this is like, the internet wasn't what it was, I guess, or I just was too naive to actually do research. I thought people made money. I thought public speakers made money by holding events and just putting them on, and people came and listened to them. You got to remember, social media wasn't what it is now. You didn't have a billion followers all over the place. So you would look at somebody, let's pick somebody smaller than Tony Robbins. One of the people I looked at, his name is Marshall Silver. I wouldn't recommend modeling him either. He was a stage show act in Vegas that decided to become a public motivational speaker. He would go around and he would 3 or 4 times a year fill 50-person rooms. And I thought that's how he made his money. I didn't understand the difference. So like my business in the beginning, I was like, I really love talking in front of people. I love entertaining. And I was like, well, I can either be a stand-up comic or I can be a motivational speaker and I can go out and help people. That's what I envisioned. That's not what it at all was. But bringing it full circle, that is pretty much what I do now.
Okay, amazing. And I think it's a really important distinction because you can be someone who has certain topics that you are an expert in that people ask you to talk about a lot, right? I go to podcast conferences, I speak about AI and podcasting because I have my foot in both those worlds. Or I talk about education because I'm also a college professor. But you have to have that hook. And I think, that's such a different way. Like I'm talking to people now about some workshops we're going to do online in January and how scripted out it has to be. And that's not my natural inclination, right? I like to be off the cuff. I like to have organic, natural conversations. So it's a very different type of conversation you have to have with your audience. You're still adding a lot of value, but there's this different energy. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that and what makes this difference.
Sure. Well, what you're talking about is 100% correct. Like people's time over the last 15 years has gotten crunched down, right? Like we're trying to fit more things in less amount of time and have like work-life balance, which I don't think is a real thing. I don't think it should be. I think you should enjoy what you're doing enough that it becomes ingrained in your life. But that's a different conversation. Like people are looking for, what am I going to get out of said thing? This is like a full circle. Before COVID, people were willing to get on a plane, fly somewhere, get a hotel, and be in a room for 3 days to get big outcome. COVID taught people we can all stay in our house and be on this thing called Zoom. The thing is that you get about, I would say, 40% of what you would get out of a live event on Zoom. But so many people want their time more than they want that extra 60% that they'll be on Zoom. You have to, this is why sales is so important. Sales, whether you're doing it one-to-many or one-on-one, is about providing enough value, showing them enough value versus their money and their time. So how do you do that effectively?
Right.
The 3 things that I have found that drive people the most, one is a case study. So instead of telling people, hey, you're going to come to this event and you're going to learn about AI, that's like mid, right? Now, if you take a specific thing you're going to learn out of AI, you're going to learn how to have AI take all your meeting notes, put them together and organize your calendar. That's kind of cool. Like that might get some people in. Actually, give me a really sexy hook for AI.
I have two AI things that I'm definitely speaking about in January. One is how I use AI to vet guests in a proprietary system of agents. And I'm actually speaking to a group of people who are trying to be guests on podcasts. And then I'm going to also talk about my Done With You program for people who want to then make the transition into podcasting. And then the other one is at a PodFest, a big podcast conference, and I'll be speaking about future-proofing your podcast in the AI era. So it's a lot about how to use different specific tools to streamline processes and systems, but then also how do you keep your authenticity rooted, the parts, the conversations, the back and forth that we love that make it still human.
Okay, so the way that, like if I'm holding a workshop or if I'm holding a 3-day event, people, what you're giving them right now is an outcome, but there's no pain. You always want to start with the pain. So I'm going to go with the people who want to be guests on shows. Why do they want to be guests on shows? Increase your authority. What do they get through increasing their authority? They're going to make more money. They're going to get a better job. Like you can start leaning into that, right? But then what's the opposite? And I would come up with with a good solid opposite, which is like, why are you getting passed over for the job promotion? Why aren't you getting the impact that you would like? That's a question. And then I always tell people there's a case study is 5 pieces told as tightly as you can get it. So the first thing is, and I'll build a fake one for you so you can see if you want, but the first thing is, what pain were they suffering from? What else did they try to solve it? They worked with you. Don't ever say how, because that's what you're selling. The epiphany, which is working with you, always links to what you're selling. Then there's the outcome that they got and the emotional outcome that they got. So everybody says they want more money, they want more visibility, but what they really want is what impacts their ego or makes them feel emotional. So those are the 2 outcomes, right? So if I was saying this for somebody, I would say, Dr. Joe was a chiropractor who wasn't standing out in his industry and he was getting passed over to speak at conferences. He tried writing a book. He tried doing some public speaking. He tried TikTok, but none of those things really grabbed traction. Working with me, we built his podcast. I'm going to show you how at this event or at this workshop. Working with me, he was able to get on national stages, grew his following by more than 50,000, and became a thought leader in his industry. But really what happened for him is he felt like he was making a difference because his proprietary system got in the hands of more doctors and is being used more, and he knows that his legacy is growing. So I would take that and I would tighten it till it's basically 5 to 6 sentences. And then I shared those stories. That's the first big chunk. The second thing though is just telling stories. People, when they hear information, pull back a lot, but they lean into stories because they see themselves in the story. If you want people to be, the main reason people come to events, live events specifically, like not Zoom, is because they feel like the person is being authentic. They feel like they're really going to get to know somebody. How do you break down walls of authenticity? I bet you know this. How do you do it?
Oh, how do I do it personally? I share stories. I share really personal stuff about where I was, for instance, when I moved back to LA and the hardships I had to go through and the things that I had, I had to put my ego aside and do this and this and this. And then now I never would have imagined that I'd be a college professor, a top podcaster, and all the things that I do. I never saw that vision.
Awesome.
I never would have dreamed about that. And that's put me on stages and that's put me, I'm a full-time podcaster, like all these other things. Yeah. So I have stories for days and I also have case studies. So we're good for those.
Well, you just hit on the main thing. So the trick, and I tell people this all the time, whatever your area is, so I'm going to say podcasting, you want to share the before, during, after. But the way that you really hook people in for authenticity is you share raw moments, but don't make them related to what you do. If you're a relationship coach, you don't want to share that you're a mess in a relationship, right? Because people won't trust you. It breaks trust. But if you share, like, I'm a mess in my travel schedule, or I'm a mess over here, people lean in and they're like, oh my goodness, this is a real person, not some fake persona.
Yep.
But they know how to do X. So sharing authentic moments. The other thing that you can do if you really want people in person is you don't offer recordings, or you don't offer virtuals, but you offer hot seats, coaching around, because people want that. Like they want your time and energy. Those are probably the two biggest single things that you can do. The third one, which would take a long time to get into, is having great partnerships with people that will promote what you are doing, but are not like they're in the same ball, right? They're in the same sphere, but they don't conflict with what you're doing. If you really are a good partner, you'll get people. I have friends. I have 3 really good friends who teach webinars and events, but they do it differently than me. So they're willing to promote me to their list. They're willing to put me on their stages because I show up with a different energy and a different vibe. And they might have attracted the person in, but they're never going to buy from them. So they'll buy from me instead, and I'll give them a cut of that.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about the difference between Zoom events and in person. And I know, and I want to hear a little bit about how did you manage this during COVID, right? Because that certainly turns everybody and all of our businesses on their heads and our heads and made us all have to take a hard look at what we're doing. But then also, I am seeing that people really want to go back to live events. We get Zoom fatigue. I mean, I'm doing between this week and next week, 24 to 26 interviews for my podcast so that I have stacked up enough before the end of the year. And I also have meetings and client work and other things. But it is so nice to be with people in person, and you get to see their actual reactions, and there's a different energy there.
There so is. So I have a couple thoughts on this. The easy thing is Zoom because people will kind of show up, right? But there's a problem. Most people don't show up with the camera on. They're only showing up for 20 to 30% of the event. They're logging in, they're logging out, they're getting distracted by all the stuff, right? But there's no cost, or there's a much lower cost. So the lady that I was talking about 2 weeks ago, if she would have held that as a Zoom event, her budget probably would have been $5K, $8K versus $150,000. So big jump there. But if you're listening to this and you're like, I want to do a live event, one of the best things that you can do, it's still a challenge, is 10 to 15 people. In the great thing about using a smaller amount of people, you can do them in a hotel suite. You can host them in a co-working space. Co-working space versus a hotel, this is a secret hack. You can do usually about 100 people in a good co-working space. They give you coffee and tea for free. A hotel is going to charge you $100 per gallon for coffee.
And co-working spaces are looking for programming for the people who are renting space from them.
Yes, go do a co-working space. But you can hold a small event, 10 to 15 people, and in a live event, it's less people, but your closing rate will double. So if you love being in person, do a Zoom event. Take the people that did not buy, maybe they didn't show up all that well, but then segment that list and really feed into them. I like to do it city by city, which is, that's what I started with, right? We held events all over, like literally city to city to city. And I would do the same thing. Donut drops. I would go there. So I lived in Airbnbs for a long time. I would go there, drop off a whole bunch of donuts, hustle, put 30 people in a room. I would do that within 2 to 3 weeks. And then next city. You can do that now, though, by segmenting your list. You can run local area Facebook ads. You can boost a post to a circle, right? So if you want to do Chicago, you could easily circle downtown Chicago, run Facebook retargeting ads like crazy, do a virtual event, sell a couple people, but then what you're really looking for is 10 people to meet you at X place to do a workshop. And that's where you sell the high ticket, in my opinion. That's a big ball of wax to your question.
Yeah.
Anything specific out of that stand out that you'd like?
No, I think that's an interesting strategy. And a lot of people that I speak to these days are living a more nomadic lifestyle, right? I spoke to somebody today. He's in Austin right now, but he and his girlfriend have been traveling for the last year and a half. And next year, they'll probably anchor in 4 places, 1 a quarter. But the things that we used to think of like, well, that sounds a little complex. You're kind of breaking it down a little bit. And I think with all of the different availability of Airbnbs or other types of housing, the different things that we have accessible to us nowadays, it makes it a lot easier to think about that kind of structure.
Yeah, absolutely. You can definitely live that way. Going back to events though, if you want a big room, if you want a room of everybody that used to talk to me used to say like, I want a room of 500 people. You've got to think it's going to cost you conservatively $1,000 a head to put those people in the room. I helped with a different event 2 years ago. and we had 1,200 people in there, and his budget was 2.4 million. It was a super great event. So out of that event, he sold about 5 million. But subtract the event costs, subtract what he pays his staff, he probably netted maybe 1 million, maybe 1.5. So it's like, how do you, most people are not at the scale where they can do that, right? If you're a corporation listening to this, if you have corporate dollars, you have people that are coming there, maybe you have a sales team, that's a different thing altogether. Your budget's going to be different. And the way you get people there is different. But for coaches, consultants, people that are more of the like solopreneur, I would look at any reasonable big city. I'm outside of Denver. I can go hold an event once per quarter in Denver with 20 to 30 people in the room and make high ticket sales out of that. And maybe not even at the event, just through follow up and having conversations with people. It really depends. If you want to hold, the other thing you can do is hold a 4-hour workshop anywhere, promote it like crazy. This goes back to sales. You're going to have to be willing to have conversations. People aren't going to show up. You did ask about COVID, and I'll lightly segue through it. We went into COVID being an in-person events only company.
Yeah.
COVID hit, and I was like, what do I do? We ended up, I had one of my clients that I'd done a live event for. He said, hey, if you help me do a webinar, we'll see what it does. And I'd like to do it as a rev share model. I said, okay, I'll take a shot. We ended up doing $80K in the first 2 days. And that one went on to do a couple $1 million in a couple months. He had an ad budget. I want to be really clear. It wasn't like, right. He had ads. From there, he said, will you help me do a virtual event? I said, sure. It's the same format. I don't know how it's going to go. And we had less show up. Our show up rate was about 60%, even with paid tickets. Our buying rate, instead, at a live event, we usually close 20 to 35%. Our sale rate on a virtual was like 12%. But because he had no hard costs, he was thrilled. He was like, I'll do this all day long. So we just started rolling them out. Now you see show up rates are even less because of all the Zoom fatigue and all the stuff going on. But I would say a live or a virtual event, you should still see a close rate of 10 to 12%. Conservatively, 15 if you're really good and you have salespeople and you're doing all of the different things.
Yeah. Nice. We could probably go back and forth for at least a couple more hours. I think there's so much we haven't even touched on yet, but we'll leave a little bit of intrigue for the audience to go to your website where you have free resources, you have how people can work with you, events, your emceeing that you alluded to, blog, and it's just your name, Stephen, right? philipwerner.com. And we'll have that in the show notes, of course. Because we didn't even touch on the work that you're doing today. You're emceeing. You're also still helping people structure their events and all of that. You are a podcaster.
So the emceeing came out of basically we would help structure the event for people, but then people get shiny object syndrome. They get on stage and they start riffing on something and they get way off track. And we had that happen, especially first-time event holders, but it even happens with people that are a little bit more dialed in. So my emceeing came from, okay, we've structured the whole thing. I know your program in and out. I'm going to come put guardrails around you speaking, and I'm going to help get the audience where they need to be to buy. So we started building that. Do you mind if I give a shout out?
Go for it.
If you guys like all of this, steve.coffee, steve.coffee will take you to all my free resources. You can book a call with me. It's on the website as well, so you'll get there. But steve.coffee is easier than spelling my whole name. I mean, I love public speaking. I love live events. The reason I love live events so much is that when you get people in a space that is different from their normal day-to-day life, you can actually impact them because they're out of their comfort zone and you can help them grow. Whether they buy or don't, they're still going to have an amazingly transformative experience at an event. I don't know anyone who doesn't. That's why people love them. Like that's been 13 years, 14 years now of what I've been doing.
Fantastic. And Steve, do you have a favorite quote, mantra, motto?
Be kind. That's probably the easy one. The other one, I have a Machiavelli quote. Make mistakes of ambition, not mistakes of sloth. Develop the strength to do bold things, not the strength to suffer mediocrity. I actually wrote that the day I quit my job at Telluride because I was like, like I don't want to be mediocre. I don't want to get to the end of my life and have regrets. I would rather do bold things, even if they don't always work out.
Amazing. Thank you so much. This has been so fun and so much great advice. I love doing a little case study during this interview because I think that it helps all of the listeners or people who are watching walk through their own case studies. What examples do you have? What are the pain points that you're trying to solve for people? And how can you create those great marketing hooks? And then how can you turn that into maybe not just an online webinar, but into a live event? I like the fact that you talked about starting small, not worrying about, getting 10, 15, 20 solid people in versus trying to fill 2,500 seat rooms like yourself the first time you were throwing an event. So this has been really great. And we'll have to have you back on in the new year to continue the conversation and see what else is going on in the event world.
Awesome. I would love that. Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. And I'll be back again very soon with another amazing guest to share their story and their journey with you, the audience, very soon.
Thanks for listening or watching to this episode of Your Brand Amplified. Don't forget to leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast listening platform. And if you want to learn more, check us out at yourbrandamplified.com.